My name is Yusuf Ibrahim, and on this program today I'm going to link up with our political affairs reporter Murimi Mwangi, who is keeping tabs on the FOCAC summit, that is the Africa-China summit that is ongoing in Beijing, China. He's going to give us an update on that and perhaps some of the emerging issues coming out of that summit. And at this hour, we're going to talk about the need to look after our animals, generally the animal welfare. In studio, I have Kahindi Lekalhaile, who is the Director of Public Affairs at the African Network for Animal Welfare. And I understand there is a conference that is supposed to be marked here in Nairobi, Kenya, with regards to animal welfare. He's going to tell us more, perhaps, of that conference and some of the initiatives they are undertaking as a body that takes care of the animals, not just wild animals, but also domestic animals. Once again, my name is Yusuf Ibrahim. This is Bottomline Africa and the headlines. African leaders troop to Beijing for talks on trade and infrastructure financing despite a swelling debt burden. More than 7 million registered voters to elect MPs in the 80-seat parliament as the ruling Kagame party hopes to cement its authority in the legislature. Alarming statistics which indicate that half of refugee children across the world have no access to education. We take you to Sierra Leone, where Sanctuary is providing shelter to apes that are one of man's closest relatives. Of course, those are just some of the big stories we're covering for you right here on Bottomline Africa. On our Twitter poll, we're asking you, do you think the relationship between China and Africa is mutually beneficial? Do you think the relationship between China and Africa is mutually beneficial? I've already told you we have a reporter on the ground in Beijing, China, where the FOCAC summit is underway at this hour. But we'd like to hear your view. Our Twitter handle is at KTN News. You can as well tweet me at Yusuf Ibrahim. The hashtag to use, as always, is Bottomline Africa. I'm going to go through some of your feedback within the program. But for now, let me begin with our top story, which comes out of Somalia, where at least 6 people died in a suicide attack in the Somali capital of Mogadishu after a car bomb detonated Sunday. The militant group Al-Shabaab took credit for the blast, and Arash Arabasadi reports from Mogadishu.
Smoke fills the air after a terror attack in Somalia's capital city, Mogadishu. At least 6 people died when a suicide car bomb struck a local government office Sunday. The explosion destroyed the office as well as a nearby school for religious studies. Most of the school's children were away from the building at the time of the blast.
We were in the middle of our usual work when the explosion happened in front of our district office where our building was destroyed.
The extremist group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack, which blew off the roof of a mosque and damaged nearby houses.
I hid myself under the table. There was a lot of gunfire at our gate. Someone called me to check if we were safe, but when I came out, I saw many people laying on the ground injured, while others were dead.
In addition to the suicide bombers, soldiers and civilians died in the blast. Police say another dozen people sustained injuries, and the director of the ambulance service said at least 14 were hurt, 6 of them children. The attack comes a little more than a year after U.S. airstrikes killed one of the militant group's leaders.
Of course, sad development there coming out of the Somali capital. Now, African leaders are gathered in Beijing for a summit focused on economic ties, granting China a feel-good photo opportunity as it comes under increasing fire for its debt-laden approach to aid in the developing world. President Xi Jinping is hosting leaders from across the continent for the 2-day forum on China-Africa cooperation, which will include talks on his cherished, quote-unquote, Belt and Road infrastructure program. Take a look.
The two presidents are among a large and prominent delegation of African leaders who are expected to lobby for their countries and the African continent at large in a landmark cooperation that has seen the two continents spend a whopping $170 billion in trade volume last year.
I commend President Xi and President Ramaphosa our co-chairs for the careful preparation of this landmark event. The relationship between Africa and China is based on equality, mutual respect, and a commitment to shared well-being. This was our starting point 18 years ago when the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation was established.
Chinese President Xi Jinping's keynote speech laid focus on industrial development, infrastructure, trade and investment, human resource development, science and education, culture and health, environmental protection, as well as peace and security.
We recall the historical visit of Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai to Africa in the 1960s, where he articulated the key principles underpinning our comprehensive strategic and cooperative partnership.
The Chinese foreign minister also confirms that high-level dialogue will be featured in the discussions that will bring together political players and business entrepreneurs from both sides. With more countries expected to sign the China Belt and Road Initiative proposed by President Xi Jinping in 2013 as a practical model of linking Asia, Europe and Africa by upgrading infrastructure networks, the missing building blocks in Africa might finally be addressed.
We have our political affairs reporter Murimi Mwangi, who is in Beijing, China, to cover the FOCAC summit for us. Is going to join us shortly in the program. But for now, let me take you over to Rwanda, where voting has begun in Rwanda's parliamentary elections, which are expected to cement the ruling Rwanda Patriotic Front, that is RPF, absolute majority. The voting, which started on Sunday, will take place over the next 3 days at 2,500 polling stations across the East African nation.
Over 500 candidates from 5 political parties and 4 independent candidates are participating in the ongoing Rwandan parliamentary election. This election started yesterday, where people from the diaspora casted their votes, with President Kagame casting his at the Rwandan embassy in Beijing, China. The process today started at 7 a.m. Those eligible to vote in Rwanda are casting their votes, and so far so good. And being that it's not a holiday, people are coming at their own convenience and are satisfied with the process.
I think the whole process was well met. There's no big commotion around. There's actually peace with the entire process that is happening. Within, there's quite people that are directing you to where you have to go to, how to cast your ballot. So I think it's a process that I'm very comfortable and I'm very contented with.
Sisi watu wote tunaifurahia sana, kwani unaona kukia ukichagua mtu ambaye umependa ni vizuri sana. Watu wanakia wanachagua kwa utaratibu, kwa amani. Ndio maana tumesema kama organization hii ni nzuri sana.
I'm so happy because we are free. There's freedom. It's not a kind of dictatorship. This is what we call democracy. The freedom of voting. You feel free when you are going to vote.
Out of the 80 parliamentary seats, 24 are reserved for women, 2 for the youth, and 1 for people with disabilities. Again, over 200 newly registered voters are participating in this election. To earn a seat in parliament, your party or the independent candidate has to earn at least 5% of the total vote. The opposition leader, Dr. Frank Habineza, also casted his ballot at this particular polling station.
I'm expecting that my party will win at least over 20% of today's vote. So we're expecting to have at least more than 10 members of parliament, we hope.
The election process is set to end tomorrow. Then the final announcement of the results shall take place by the 16th of September. Then those elected for the 5-year term shall head on to parliament. Reporting for KTN News. in Kigali, Rwanda. My name is Adrian Kowi.
Trust our reporter there, Adrian Cohen, of course, his team, including our cameraman, for all the latest development coming out of Rwanda as far as the election is concerned. Now, the African leaders are trooping to China just days after the Iron Women of Europe, that is Germany's Angela Merkel and UK's Theresa May, concluded their walking tour of Africa. My colleague Sophia Onuno spoke to UK's Minister for African Affairs, Harriet Baldwin, on the relations between the United Kingdom and Africa. This is how that conversation went.
So, following the visit by UK Prime Minister Theresa May to Kenya, the first by a UK Prime Minister in 30 years, I'm now joined by Harriet Baldwin. She is the UK Minister of State for Africa. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Thanks.
The visit by the Prime Minister coming 30 years later at a time Brexit is the biggest story in the UK, and also Kenya's partnership with the likes of China has really grown. Does this look like playing catch-up? Because some have argued that UK is now in a quote-unquote weakened position and trying to strengthen that, and that has neglected Kenya for all these years. What do you tell those people?
Well, I say that that's a completely wrong premise, because obviously, although, as you rightly point out, it's been far too long since a UK Prime Minister has visited Kenya, we've had many other ministerial visits. So whether it's been the Foreign Secretary, my boss, the International Development Secretary, or indeed the Defence Secretary, who was here only recently. So there's a very, very broad and very wide-ranging relationship between our two governments. There's a very, very broad and wide relationship between our two economies and between our people. And in fact, I would like to just emphasize that the UK is in fact the #1 foreign direct investor in Kenya, and so we top the table. We think it's a very strong foundation on which to be ambitious to do much more. And today the Prime Minister was able to announce that there are 20 UK businesses who are going to be expanding and creating jobs here in Kenya. In addition to us being the #1 investor in Kenya, in terms of the formal job sector, we are also a very large employer already. So something like 1 in 10 Kenyans are already employed by UK firms. So it's a fantastically strong relationship. And I think we should focus on the positives and the excitement of the future that we share together, and the way that that's built on this common position and common values, common legal system, common language, and so on.
Largest investor in Kenya, but when it comes to private investment, and we heard the Prime Minister as well touch about that today, the balance of scale is sometimes seen to be tilted against Kenya, in that it will be easier for a UK investor to come and set up shop as opposed to the other way around. Is there a way we can look into making it more open to Kenyans seeking to invest in the UK?
Well, I'm delighted to be able to tell you that the UK is always open for business. We really welcome inward investment. We welcome inward investment from all around the world. In fact, I think we're the #1 destination for foreign direct investment in the whole of Europe. So it is a very open economy. We are an economy that's open for business, and we're an economy that really, as global Britain, stands for free trade. You know, for decades and decades, we've stood for free trade around the world. We believe that trade is the way that we build sustained economic development. We believe that trade is a win-win. And so we're really excited about the potential to take what's already a strong trading relationship and take it to the next level. You mentioned earlier the issue of Brexit. I was delighted today that the Prime Minister was able to confirm to the President that the UK has the political will to ensure that Kenya will continue to get the best possible access to the UK market further to Brexit, and that we will ensure that that's a foundation once we've left the EU on which we can build and ensure that we get further liberalisation. But the tariff-free, quota-free access to the UK market is something that we're committed to delivering.
Right. And in terms of what also the Prime Minister talked about, becoming the largest G7 investor in Africa, what do you intend to do differently across the continent? Because the issue, especially around UK, is the visa regime. That question came up today. It was not answered by both the PM and the Kenyan president. But it has been a rather unfriendly process. It has been, they have very few processing centers, so that in an effort also to open it up and be convenient for that kind of business and interaction, how can that be handled?
Well, to your first point, which was about the ambition to be the largest G7 investor in any African economy, of course, I mentioned already that we are already #1 in Kenya.
In Kenya, yes.
And I think that that gives us a strong foundation to take things forward. What we're going to do differently, in addition to the many announcements that we made today, both with the private sector and the public sector, we can see that next year we will host a big African investment summit in London. I think what's unique about the UK's offer is that we provide a sort of long-term, patient capital into countries in Africa. We are often, through one of our best kept secrets, which is called CDC. It's the UK's Development Finance Institution. It's been going for some 70 years, and it has a portfolio already in Kenya worth some 300 million. So they invest in the kind of businesses that are at an early stage, that create a lot of jobs, and they're at the development frontier. So to give you a great example that all of your viewers will be familiar with, M-Pesa was something that the UK invested in 10 years ago, and now look how that's taken off. All of these things are things where we think the UK brings something special and something unique to the table. And the City of London is very much the meeting place for all of the world's best investment ideas and all of the world's sort of greatest investors. We have something like $8 trillion worth of assets under management in the UK. You mentioned also the visa issue, and of course one of the things that we have is a very efficient service that will require that people do get their paperwork in ahead of their planned visit. So it is always really something that I encourage people to do.
But a few centres.
15 days. And the centres itself, that's more of an administrative issue. It's a question of how quickly you can get your visa. And I'm afraid it does, just like for UK visitors coming to Kenya, sometimes mean that you have to be a bit efficient about your paperwork. You have to plan ahead. And it's something we're committed to making as efficient as possible.
So it's likely to improve.
And it's exciting that I think there probably is room for improvement in terms of those processing times. I think, you know, with some of the innovations in the world, I think they can apply equally well to visa issuance for sure. But I think it's exciting that there are over 100,000 British visitors to Kenya every year, and it's a growing destination. And so I think we do need to commit ourselves to making those kind of people-to-people visits as easy as possible. The Prime Minister also announced while she was in South Africa that we're increasing the number of scholarships for master's level to the UK, Chevening scholarships for students from Africa. We're also, as you know, a great destination to go and study, and we have no limit whatsoever in terms of the number of students who can come and study at our prestigious institutions. So there's so many ways in which those very strong people-to-people links can become even stronger in the future.
And we also had the two leaders talk about the cooperation on returning proceeds of corruption stashed in the UK. But one particular instance, you know, as far as the PM saying she will stand with Kenya, UK in Kenya in fighting corruption, following the 2013 election, there were bribery reports with the electoral body officials from that and a company in the UK. But following that, we saw convictions in the UK. That is yet to happen in Kenya, almost, 5 years on. In your view, in light of this cooperation and support, when it's so fast a turnaround time in your country as opposed to here, and yet it's the same people that were engaging, what do you say to that?
Well, look, we very much welcome President Kenyatta's focus in terms of tackling what he described today as this vice. And what we've committed to do in terms of the agreement that was signed today is where a crime has been committed and where the proceeds of that crime have been found to be within the UK, that we commit to returning those proceeds for the benefit of the people of Kenya, and that they will be used for development activities within Kenya. So I think it's a fantastic commitment, and I think it's one where, as you rightly point out, it can sometimes be frustrating that the rule of law is a slow process sometimes. But I think we very much stand alongside the government's aim to tackle what the President described today as this vice.
And the Prime Minister also talking about soon announcing funding to the AMISOM. But as Britain, UK has been in EU, the funding was slashed to AMISOM significantly, and we've seen the strain that has affected the war against Al-Shabaab. So what can you speak to this promised funding, and how significant will it be to fill the gaps already being felt within that mission?
Well, the UK, as you know, has been a steadfast supporter of AMISOM. We have been at the forefront of the international efforts to raise funding for AMISOM. We will continue. In fact, we pledge to continue to step up that effort in terms of funding for AMISOM, but also commitment towards that transition. So I think it was welcome today that on both sides they recognise that there needs to be a process of transition to a Somali-led vision in terms of security. But the UK pledges to continue to be at the forefront, both within the EU, of pressing for continued funding for AMISOM, but also to step up our campaigning in terms of raising money for this very important security priority. We thank the Kenyan contributors, particularly on the troop contributing side, and the contribution that you make to regional security. We really are very, very grateful for that. It's something that is important to the whole world, and we know that in terms of the Kenyan sacrifices that have occurred in Somalia, and we pledge ourselves to continue to be at your side in terms of making the case for the importance of funding AMISOM, but also the importance of working towards a transition and for future security to be taken over by Somalia itself.
All right, finally, the Prime Minister, in visiting Kenya, had visited South Africa, both parts of the Commonwealth, the two countries. But the opposition leader there, Julius Malema, talked about a vision to withdraw from the Commonwealth. And I'll quote what he said: "The Commonwealth is presided over by the colonizer, and we reject that. The type of respect that we give to the colonizer is one that perpetuates white supremacy." What do you say to that kind of a sentiment?
Well, of course, it's not a sentiment that I would recognise at all, because, you know, for me, the Commonwealth is a partnership of 53 countries. 18 of them are in Africa. In fact, there are other countries in Africa that are keen to join the Commonwealth. So it's a growing family of nations, who share a common legacy in terms of the legal system, in terms of very often the language, although we've had French-speaking and Portuguese-speaking members join the Commonwealth recently. And it's a great partnership of shared values where we can all pledge ourselves to the future prosperity, particularly of our young people. One of the things that's really exciting about the Commonwealth is that 2/3 of the population of the Commonwealth is under the age of 30. So it's an incredibly young group of people. We've been able to work together in terms of a shared agenda on gender equality. We've been able to work together in terms of a shared agenda in terms of the value of our oceans. Countries are small ocean states, and so we all need to work together to keep our oceans clean for future generations.
But what do you say to the dissatisfaction in that comment by perhaps some of the Commonwealth members?
Well, I think you've just quoted an opposition spokesman in one Commonwealth country. We were fortunate enough this year to have the host, to be the host of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting.
Correct,
And it was universally declared to be, including by the President of South Africa, to have been an absolutely outstanding meeting where we all pledged together as a Commonwealth of countries to move forward on the agendas that I have mentioned. The next Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting will be in Kigali. So I think that's, again, a very African, the centre of Africa. And so I think it highlights the value that so many African nations put on their membership of the Commonwealth.
All right. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you for
Harriet Baldwin, Minister for
so
African Affairs.
Okay,
we appreciate your time.
Much.
Thank
really
you.
Grateful to having you.
Thank you.
Of course, that is my colleague Sophia Nuna there speaking to the UK's Minister for African Affairs, Harriet Baldwin. And that interview with the UK Africa Minister for Africa takes Bottomline Africa to a very short break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.